I made a couple of frames using a technique where I stacked a couple of pieces of wood together. And one of the frames I used to frame a picture, and this one I used to frame a mirror. And I like this technique because it gives you a lot of detail on the edge of it, right in here, on the edge of the frame. But you don't have to do a lot of work to get that detail. So in this video, I'm gonna show you how I make a frame like this. Now, when I said that I stacked two pieces of wood, here's what I mean. Here's a bottom piece, and here's a top piece. If I take the top piece and I just put it on top of the bottom one, then you get the basic blank that's needed to make the frame. And what you see is that there's a lip over here, and the lip can be as big or as small as you want it to be. See, I just made it bigger there. And if you want it smaller, you just slide this board over that way and you get a smaller lip. Anyway, the other thing that's formed when you stack these two pieces of wood is you get a rabbet right here. And then what that rabbet does is it's the place where the picture and the glass are going to lay. So usually when you make a picture frame, you have to cut the rabbet. But when you stack wood like this, the rabbet's made automatically. So obviously what I've done here is I've just taken two rectangular pieces of wood, which is what you would start with. The next step is to cut a profile on the bottom piece. All right, so let me move this out of the way. I'll put this bottom piece here. And you can see that what I've done is I use a Roman ogee. It's just a profile on the bottom. Now you don't have to use a Roman ogee. You can use any profile you want. And then the top piece is going to go on top of it like that. So just by cutting that, I use a router, obviously. I use a router to cut this Roman ogee. So just by cutting that one profile, you're already starting to get a buildup of detail. The Roman ogee, obviously, but then where the top piece sits on top of the bottom piece, you're getting another little horizontal surface there. So the last step is to do the same thing to the top, except again on the bottom you just cut one profile because you want this to stay straight, and over here you want this profile to be whatever looks good to you. On the top piece though, you're going to have to cut two profiles, one on this side and one on that side. And I have one that's already made up. I can show you what that looks like. Okay, so now there's the same rabbet, right? There's the same Roman ogee over here. But what I've done now is on the top piece, I've cut another Roman ogee here, and here I used a round over bit because I didn't want to use the same profile on all three surfaces. Basically, you're going to be using your router to profile three different surfaces: 1, 2, and 3. And you can use anything you want. I used a fairly big round over bit here. So what do we have here? These are cutoffs from the two frames that I made. They look pretty much the same, but the difference is in size. This top piece here is narrower than this top piece here. So I wanted a little bigger, sort of a more massive frame for the mirror, the bathroom mirror. So I used wider wood than I did here. This one was used just for a picture frame. So you get to vary two things. One is the width of the wood, and the other is, as I mentioned earlier, the profiles. And you can see too that for the picture frame I have a fairly small rabbet, and for the mirror I needed a bigger rabbet because I had some other, a heavy piece of glass actually to go in there. So by using bigger wood and by sliding it over where I needed it to be, I got the rabbet that I needed. Now the way I joined these two pieces of wood is I glued them and I screwed them. So you got to be careful when you put the glue here. You don't want to overdo it because you don't want the glue to spill out onto this surface here. If it did, you'd have to do cleanup. So if you use the glue sparingly in this area, then you can avoid that squeeze out. It doesn't matter if it squeezes out on the rabbit side because nobody's going to see that, and you can just clean it up pretty easily. Okay, and then as far as screwing it together goes, you see that hole there? All I did was, before I glued it, I drilled the hole. Actually, I used clamps, just regular spring clamps to hold these two pieces of wood together. And I drilled the hole and I countersunk the hole. I think you can see that it's countersunk there. So by drilling it, then you can throw some glue on there, and since you'll have it aligned with those spring clamps at the time that you drill it, after the glue goes on, you can run the screws in and everything will be perfectly aligned. And I put screws about, I guess, every 8 inches or so. You could vary it however you want. When I had something heavy, I guess I wanted a lot of screws. And then as far as the joinery goes, you use joinery like you would for a normal picture frame. This is just a cutoff, from the end. And as you can see, I mitered it, and I also use splines on mine, but I guess you wouldn't have to use splines. It just makes it stronger. Now when you run that screw up, you obviously don't want to run the screw up over here, because if you use a long screw it might come out the top. So you want to run that screw over in this area here where you have the maximum thickness. Okay, the last thing I'll mention is where do you put the spline? Okay, you actually could put it in anywhere you want in this surface. I put mine here. Now when you put a spline, I cut them with a table saw, so when you put a spline there, it means your blade's going to sit pretty high, but that didn't turn out to be a problem. I have a jig that I made that I cut the splines with, and it doesn't matter how high that blade sits as long as it'll reach all the way up to where you need it to be. And I think you could probably put the spline down here. I don't see why not, but I didn't do that. And if you did that, the blade wouldn't have to sit as high. So that's it. Those are if you follow all those steps and you do your joinery with miters and splines, you get a pretty I think a pretty good looking frame.